Part 13. Nergal is a stupid asshole idiot head.
And he was a good friend.
So, how stupid is Nergal? The amount of times that Nergal acts in ways seemingly contradictory to his stated goals are so numerous that you could put him in a giant list. Let's do that, shall we? Number 1. 6 months after Limb Mode, he has Albert, Ninian and Nils at the Dragon's Gate. This is everything he needs in order to summon dragons, but he doesn't hold the ceremony. For no reason. Number 2. Effidel retrieves Ninian during the Dragon's Gate chapter, and Nergal has once again everything he needs. But yet again, he opts to wait, this time so that Eliwood and company can be there for dramatic purposes. And then when Nils interferes, he yells at Effidel so that he can yell at Nils instead of doing something himself. For no reason. Number 3. Nergal is significantly weakened after being stabbed by Albert. But by the time chapter 29 rolls around, his powers are back and he kidnaps Ninian again. When he leaves, he causes a massive explosion, which Athos barely manages to protect them all from. However, Athos says that Nergal could have easily killed them all by increasing the power of the explosion if he wanted to. Remember that Nergal clearly stated earlier he wanted Eliwood dead, and sicked the Black Fang on him in order to achieve this, yet he opted not to kill him here, for no reason. Number 4. Furthermore, after capturing Ninian, instead of hypnotizing her into calling dragons or using her powers, he lets her escape. Then after teleporting to Eliwood and company, he grabs Nils, saying he came for a replacement, that he will have Nils do what Ninian did not, before inexplicably leaving without Nils. For no reason. Number 5. So now Nergal has Ninian's Dragonstone, infused with her quintessence. He states that he can open the gate whenever he wants now, but apparently he's run out of juice from the Black Fang. He lost too much quintessence from being damaged by Athos to safely summon the numbers he needs. This directly contradicts his reaction when he fought with Athos, and doesn't match with what the game presents either. So basically it's bullshit. No real reason. Number 6. This doesn't make any sense anyway, because surely the net quintessence cost to summoning a dragon has to be less than the amount he gets out of sucking a dragon dry, right? Couldn't he just summon one dragon, control it, and then use the power he got to keep summoning more? There's just no logic to this. Unless this is like Fire Emblem Heroes, where it's cheaper if you summon them all at once. And don't forget, Nergal's claims that he doesn't have enough quintessence directly follows his creation and mass teleportation of waves upon waves of a morph army directly into Castle Ostia. And as far as I can tell, he also created the 8 supermorph mini-bosses at this point. Oh yeah, and he also infuses Limstella with extra power, to the point that you will fucking die, even after he supposedly has no quintessence left. His plan was to use these morphs in order to lure then subdue Eliwood's group to take their quintessence in order to safely summon dragons. Think about this for a second. In order for this to add up, the entire amount of quintessence that Nergal lost from taking 5 damage from Athos, which he claimed didn't damage him at all, was more than the sum of the quintessence he used for doing all this crap. You know, cause if it wasn't, he would have had enough in reserve with Limstella to cover the loss and summon the dragons. Remember, Nergal was ready to summon dragons with Ninian before she left. He had enough before that. Maybe he had the morphs already, but denning seems to be new, unless he can like reprogram morphs, but teleporting them like that should be pretty taxing. I mean, if he had this damn army before, why wasn't he using it to start a war by just teleporting shitloads of them around? I guess maybe he had exactly enough combined with Limstella before he got damaged, and he was just short, so he had to invest a lot into getting Eliwood's quintessence to have enough again. But then you gotta wonder why he doesn't just go kill a fucking squirrel or something for a tiny bit more. The point is, none of the numbers here add up. The game is like, it's magic, I don't gotta explain shit. See, one of the major problems with Nergal is that he was written to be too powerful. He can teleport himself or underlings all over the place, cause massive explosions, create armies, hypnotize people, regenerate from major wounds. A villain like this can cause serious problems for any story if they aren't handled carefully. There has to be a reason why they're not just annihilating everyone who could stop him immediately as they're taking over the world or whatever. FE7 kind of attempts to address this by giving Nergal a specific motivation: get power to open the gate. It also outlines the requirements needed, which are access to the Dragon Kids and a stockpile of quintessence. We know Nergal's original plan was to get his children back, but his experiments with the dark side, I mean dark magic, caused him to eventually lose more and more of his memory and sanity, resulting in the villain we have now. All he remembers now is that he wants power, and he wants to open the gate. This excuses his behavior up to a certain point. He doesn't need to be rampaging across the continent, blowing everything up to take control of the world, because that's not really his goal. And it's also okay that sometimes he's not super focused on using all of his power to kill Eliwood, because again, it's not at the top of his priorities. The only two things that are really important to him are access to the Dragon Kids and having quintessence. But these facts don't come close to addressing the many problems with his behavior. Nergal is interested in schemes that will cause conflict, which he can use to acquire quintessence, but he never makes use of his powers in order to achieve this goal. Teleportation alone allows for countless ways to start a war of some kind. Imagine if Nergal warped a bunch of morphs wearing Lycian armor into Byrne's castle and then had him kill Zephiel. Or he could just hypnotize a bunch of people instead of using morphs. And then there's the bit near the end where he explicitly wants to kill Eliwood, but he goes about it in the most roundabout way possible instead of just blowing him up. I could go on, but you get the point. If you give a villain too much power and he doesn't use his powers to accomplish his goals, it weakens him as a character, and subsequently, the story as well. And these are just examples that were about his path to victory. There are multiple instances that I've already covered when Nergal has everything he needs and is quite literally holding the win button in his hands but opts not to push it. Even if I stay within the confines of this simplistic, juvenile fantasy story and the tropes that come along with it and accept everything that happens within the story at face value, the game still blatantly breaks its own established rules. Nergal has the two things he needs, but he doesn't win. Or rather, he suddenly doesn't, even though he had them moments ago. The writers couldn't even be consistent within their own framework. It's not even moving the goalposts at this point. It's pretending the ball didn't go in when it clearly did. Even if you think a lot of my criticisms are unfair because of the broader perspective I have of the script as a whole, I really don't see how you can excuse this. Well, there is one excuse people have tried, the insanity plea. It goes something like this. Nergal is so high on dark magic that he cannot think straight, and none of his actions have to make any sense as a result. For one, that's bullshit, because Nergal is clearly not written as someone who has constant lapses of sanity or anything. He is shown to be quite capable of thinking ahead and crafting plans. Sure, the plans suck and don't make use of the many options he has available, but they're not just the crazed whims of a lunatic. Even if you accept the idea of Nergal being a completely irrational entity, that doesn't make for a compelling story. It just makes him an overpowered psychopath with no rhyme or reason behind his actions. And the only reason the protagonists aren't all dead is because they got lucky. It's like living in a world with a vengeful god rolling a d6 every 5 minutes, and if he gets a 6, then he just destroys the whole world. It devalues everything the protagonists do. This kind of an idea can work if the writers are trying to invoke a constant sense of desperation and hopelessness, but when does FE7 even try to do that? Did you as a player feel that? When I think of desperation in a Fire Emblem game, I don't think of FE7, I think of something like FE5's Manster arc. The only desperation I feel when playing this game is desperately wanting it to be over. Some people say they like Nergal because he's a tragic villain, you know, because he has a sappy backstory. But the audience is exposed to so many instances of Nergal behaving in an exaggerated evil manner that he becomes more like a still Saturday morning cartoon villain than a fearsome antagonist. Think about all the times he gloats to the protagonists about his plans, and all the times he cackles maniacally. And then there's shit like this too. No, I've failed. Nils, you whelp. If not for your interference... Come, both of you. And really, Nergal's backstory is more of an accessory than anything else. It's pretty awkwardly tacked on, practically an Easter egg within New Game Plus. He's set up to independently function without it, so the extra backstory that's added onto him doesn't feel convincing. It's like if they tried to add a mushy origin story to Skeletor or something in a DVD special. It just wouldn't stick to your regular perception of him at all. He's just too much of a joke, you wouldn't buy it, and that's what Nergal's like. And besides, you don't need your villain to be sympathetic for them to be compelling. Take arguably the main antagonist of FE1, Gharnef. He's a character who Nergal is clearly heavily influenced by, just like how Athos was heavily influenced by Goto. Both Nergal and Gharnef are powerful dark wizards, who fell from grace and lost their humanity. They teleport around and taunt the protagonists, they employ schemes involving rulers of the continent, and they have evil laughs. But the similarities end there. Gharnef doesn't show up in person nearly as much. only making 2 major appearances. But this actually works in his favor, because the instances he does appear carry much more weight, and his demeanor doesn't have time to wear itself thin. Even the mechanical circumstances of how you encounter him are unique and fit with his character well. When he appears in the desert to taunt you, you can't damage him at all, and when you have to confront him later, he uses illusions to trick you and waste your time. And to add to that, Gharnef's plans were far more in-depth and far more successful than any of Nergal's. Gharnef is responsible for nearly everything that happens in both the War of Shadows and the War of Heroes, either directly or indirectly. He took over Khadin, resurrected Medius and the Dollar Empire, manipulated powerful rulers into doing his bidding, and stole powerful relics like the Falchion. The effects of his machinations are felt constantly throughout the story. To top it off, Gharnef's hubris, his arrogance, is actually justified. He really is literally invincible, and he really does have everyone in the palm of his hand. He states clearly that the reason he didn't go out of his way to stop Marth was because he considered Marth to be a pawn too. Comparatively, Nergal shows up too much, all of his schemes fall flat, and he has no reason whatsoever for many of his actions. And the fact that he loses at all doesn't make any sense. When Gharnef fails, it's not because of a stupid oversight or inexplicable reasoning. It's because of something he was incapable of knowing about or understanding. The gentle and caring old Manakete, Bantu. Bantu has the exact qualities that Gharnef lacked, and his lack of these qualities started his spiraling downfall, as Goto refused to let Gharnef inherit the aura spell, because of Gharnef's lack of a caring heart. So Gharnef's inability to account for Bantu's tender words being able to save Tiki is so in line with his character that it hurts. Indeed, it could be said that the reason that Gharnef was so good at scheming and planning was because of his attitude towards other mortals. His lack of compassion and solidarity with others increased his capability for deceit and manipulation, but his lack of these means that he could never understand or account for them. Gharnef succeeds at being a more straightforward but well-executed antagonist compared to Nergal. Nergal tries to up the ante by being even more evil and more powerful, but bigger ain't always betterer. It's pretty embarrassing how an NES game with a script that's less than a quarter of the length of FE7 manages to have a better villain. I mean, is there anything Nergal even does right when it comes to being a villain? He's not the kind of villain you love to hate, because he doesn't really do anything to make you really want to take him down, he just gloats. He doesn't really give off a sense of being imposing or threatening, no matter how much the main characters try to talk him up, which, by the way, they do all the fucking time, because he's just so incompetent and appears too many times to feel like a dangerous unknown factor. He's not really charismatic, and despite what they try to tell you, he doesn't really have a personal connection to the protagonists. I guess Limstella and Denning are pretty unsettling, but that's more to do with them than Nergal, so I wouldn't really count it in his favor. In the end, the only good thing about Nergal is basically his overall story outline. I like the idea of a father who gives up everything to try and see his kids again, but ends up losing himself to the point where he cannot remember what he's trying to achieve anymore. But as I said before, the execution just stinks. So basically there's nothing good about Nergal himself in this entire game. I rest my case. But I'm not done yet.